So, you want to stick one of these into one of these? Stay tuned for the details. Okay, so in order to get your GM alternator in here, you have to take out the stock alternator. So here's my original 1987 Nippon Denso with the big plug on the backside, and you know, this thing's quite a boat anchor at this point right here. It's laid out almost exactly the same as the GM alternator. So you know, you've got ears directly across from each other, and you know, that's about where the similarities end. Now, this is the stock bracket that bolts to the engine. You've got 3 bolts on here, okay? And it's attached just right down there, real simply. And you know, you've got your bottom pivot bolt on there, and that's about it. So some guys take these, they cut these brackets and weld them, and you know, modify it to fit a GM alternator or something like that, but I'm just using one of the brackets that you can buy from Low Range Offroad over here. So get the stock bracket out and get the new one in. Now the new bracket, you can see, bolts in just like the old one, no big deal. It's got a new bolt, and the Low Range Offroad model comes with a spacer. So what you can do is, I guess you can move that spacer from one side to the other to shift the alternator forward if you need to, depending on your belt setup. Because some guys, depending on the engine, they might use serpentine belts in here instead of the regular V-belt, like on the original 87 Samurais here with the plain 1.3. So, you know, all you're going to do is on this particular model, you're going to have that spacer shifted all the way forward to put the new alternator in. You've got to move a few things to get some space in here. One of the things you have to do is, here's the upper alternator bracket. Now, to put in a CS130, you don't need to modify this. I've seen, supposedly for some of the older Delco models, the 10 SIs and 12 SIs, some people said to actually cut a notch in this bracket to get those GM alternators to fit, but the CS130 goes in here without modifying the stock bracket. You just need to loosen this, and you need to rotate it up quite high, you know, right about there, almost vertical, to be able to get the alternator in here. You're going to turn the alternator sideways, and it kind of scrapes right under this hose. It just fits between the 2 hoses. Another thing you're going to need to change is the wiring plug. Now, this is the Nippon Denso plug that goes in the back of the alternator on the stock Samurai, and you know, it's just a big green. It only uses 2 prongs in here. There's 2 wires coming out. Mine was kind of abused and kind of destroyed and stuff like that, so you know, I had to add on some shrink and stuff like that to protect it, so now I don't need this thing at all. They do make an adapter for $24 that will plug into it. It basically changes the stock plug into an AC Delco plug to go into the other alternator. So you can leave this wiring in the vehicle, but I kind of don't recommend that for a couple reasons, which we'll get into in just a little bit. Okay, so now quick deal about the wiring. All you're going to need to hook up the new alternator is a nice heavy-duty line going straight to the battery. In my case, I didn't put a fuse in here yet or anything, but I'm going to be adding that, and you can go a lot heavier on the wire like this. This is going to come off the back of the alternator, and this is just your, you know, your main power wire going to your battery positive over here. Then, down below, what you're going to splice in, and I ended up putting quite a length of cord on here. I put in the AC Delco plug on this. You're only going to use 2 wires out of here, and on this particular connector from Autozone, all I'm using is the red and the black, and I'm not using the blue one. Some come with 4 wires in here. This one came with 3, and I'll explain what those wires actually do in just a second. But suffice to say, you're only going to need the 2. What you're going to do is the large positive wire here is going to be used as a voltage sense wire. That's what it is. It's the sense terminal, and that sense wire, some guys say to just loop it around and go to the back of the alternator. Also, that sense wire corresponds to the black and white wire in the Samurai harness, and that's how they're doing the voltage sensing. They're basically running this red wire into the main harness into the black and white to sense the voltage somewhere in there. And there can be all kinds of voltage drops and problems with the wire. So instead, I take the red sense wire that comes off the back of the AC Delco plug, and I run a new heavy-duty one up and around to the battery terminal itself. And this is just a temporary one I've slapped in here because I'm going to move everything over to a different post in just a bit after I change the wiring a little. Now, the other wire you're going to use in here, you're going to use, and you can barely see it, we're going to be using the F wire out of here. So the second wire out of this connector, the black one, is going to go into the original Samurai white with a red stripe over here. So for this alternator, there's only 3 wires to hook up. There's your main, your red sense wire coming off the plug, and then your F wire, which is to excite the alternator, going to the original white with the red stripe. And that goes to the dash light in there, the low battery indicator in there. And that part of the circuit will handle running that. So it works perfect on my vehicle here. Okay, so the CS130 that's going in here is from Autozone. And there's the part number right on the side of it. It's a DLG 1347-5-11. And I picked this one on purpose for a couple reasons. This is the pigtail that plugs into the back of the alternator. And this particular one is a Duralast 237 from Autozone in the United States here. And what it does, there's a little confusion on these plugs sometimes. This one is just labeled PLFS on the plug, but on the connector on the back here you see PLFS. The F has an I above it, so it's either the I or F terminal. You see, as it goes in there. So all we're going to be using is the sense wire, like I said, to go direct to the battery, and then the black wire coming out of this pigtail comes off the I or F terminal, and that goes to the original Samurai white with red stripe. Okay, now on these alternators, we're going to have to be aware of 2 things. Well, actually 3 things. Okay, we need to change out the pulley on the front. They normally come with serpentine belt on here, and this alternator, I'll put part numbers at the end of this video to pick one of these up, but this is basically from a range of different Chevy and GMC vehicles. This is for like 87 to 88 something trucks of different kinds, like Jimmys and Blazers and P3500 step vans, and they also use this alternator in the 1990 Corvettes with the 5.7 liter. So this serpentine belt deal has to come off if you don't have serpentine belt conversion on here, and you've got to get one of these types of pulleys here, a V-belt pulley. I believe this is just a normal GM one. On the back of this it says 52D, if that means anything. And you can also order these at a place called Adventure Offroad. He's got these pulleys for like $16, so you've got to switch that out on the front. And the next 2 issues you got to be aware of. Here is a CS130 alternator that does not work in here. The spacing is wrong on the bolts. This is the lower one. This is the upper mounting ear. Now if you notice there's not a lot of space on the top here between the fan blades and the bolt hole. I mean, you can barely get your finger in there sideways. It's got like a real short mounting ear on the top. Some of these other CS130s here, also the top mounting ear is off on this side. So it's off at like a 45-degree angle over here. You don't want that. You want the one that's straight across, and it has to be the correct spacing, correct distance on there. So this one, as you look, has a huge amount of space between the fan blades and the top of this. I mean, I can turn an entire finger sideways on here. of distance. So here they are side by side. You'll notice big difference. So you need the old school larger spacing type of CS130, not this one. Okay, now the next deal is, assuming you've got the right spacing and you've changed out your pulley, the alternator is clocked a specific way on the back. Now, this clocking here is what these come as by default. And here's your lower mounting deal, here's your upper mounting ear, and they've got the plug pointing upwards over here. This will not work in the Samurai. So you need to have this stud up towards the top. This plug has to face downwards, coming out the bottom. That's the only way this is going to work. So as you put this in here, you're not going to run this power stud into any of the engine mounting stuff over here, like the mounting bracket and whatnot. So what you've got to do to clock this thing, you've got to loosen these bolts around the outside, and they're Torx, but they can be taken off with a regular socket. You can get them on there. So we're going to loosen all three of those. We're going to take the front pulley off completely. Then you have to very carefully stand the alternator on its face like that and tap to take the faceplate off, because it'll allow you to rotate it a little bit once these side screws are removed, but you won't be able to go far enough. You're going to actually run this mounting area here into one of the ears. You will not be able to run this thing and clock it far enough. So the reason for setting it down like this and tapping is so that you don't pull the rear shell off the alternator. So the way you can tell is if that shaft stays in that bearing perfectly, like that. So you want to just put this down on a surface and, you know, tap the mounting ears, you know, tap these parts until the face comes off. And what will happen is the face will come off and you'll see the front bearing in there. You'll be able to then turn this to wherever you need to go and put this back on and tighten everything back up. Now, one way to get this pulley off, to put the V-belt on here, is lay the alternator on its lower ear on a good surface, slide a piece of wood underneath the fan blades so that it stops like that, and you're going to have to wind up putting an impact wrench on this, or get a shop to loosen this for you. Now, the sockets that fit in here are a 24 millimeter, goes in there, or a 15/16. So either one of these will actually work. So I'm going to hit it with the big electric impact here and see if I can get this thing off pretty easy here. And you know, if you don't have one of these, take it to a local car garage and just have them bust that off using air impact tool or alternator repair shop, whatever. They should be able to, you know, pop that off for you, no problem. Okay, so there we are. Since it's brand new, it came right off. And now I'm going to reclock the alternator, and last step will be to put this pulley back on, just like so. Now we're getting ready to reclock. What you need is a 1/4 inch drive, 1/4 inch socket. That's what'll go on these Torx bolts. Now they look like Torx bolts, they don't look like regular ones, but they will still work with one of these. This one, I believe, yeah, that's a 6-point. So, see, fits on there perfect, snugly onto the Torx. Remove the fan, set that aside. Okay, and we're ready to very carefully take this apart and move the front face to where we need it to go. Also, you notice here, there's big clips that hold the bearing in. So it's very easy to take the bearing out of the front housing on these. And another thing to note too, when you're taking these screws out, they come out really, really easy. And that means they're not torqued very highly into here. If you tighten these in too much, it puts a lot of stress on the bearing. It binds the bearing up and stuff like that. So when you put them back in, just do a nice, light, easy snug of the bolts with a wrench like this. Just real light. Okay, got the bolts out. And now we need to get this front face to come off without pulling the rear of the alternator off. If you go to pull the rear out, the brushes will pop out in here. So one of the ways to do that is just to balance the alternator on its front spindle and tap just the face downwards. There we go. And now this one here, I'm tapping on it. It's coming off really easily. There's also a small spacer that you'll hear drop off. Okay, just very carefully, very slowly take the front off here. Now another thing too, if you happen to have one of these faces and a used alternator, you know, that's got the right spacing, you can just easily pull this face off. You take the face right off the alternator, switch it onto another alternator if you've got one. And so right in here you've got a washer that fits on there, and there's your bearing just sitting in there. You pop those 3 clips and you can drop your bearing right out. So what we're going to do is, without dropping all the guts of the alternator, we want the plug facing downwards towards the large bottom mounting gear. So just line up our side pieces. Like so. Balance the alternator back on its shaft. And give it a little tap. Okay, and now we've got the plug facing downwards, or upwards, as you might call it, and the power stud is right there. Okay, so put your washer back on the front, get your fan back on there for now, and get your bolts back in here to put the case back together. And as you look on here, you'll see your alignment. Make sure they're lined up decently. There we go, see, that's nice and straight. So just finish up putting these screws back in. Okay, and remember, finishing step, just snug. You'll see the case here, the line where you split it, you'll see that close right up. When you snug these, just go around in a pattern on all 3 until you're sure the case is back together. And choke up on the wrench. Okay, and don't over tighten. And it should spin very, very freely. This alternator didn't come with a lock washer on here, so put a little bit of blue Loctite on here if you're paranoid, or I don't have any blue Loctite right now, so I'm going to use a tiny bit of super glue on the threads. just a little bit in one spot to act as Loctite. And that'll harden on there, and you'll be good to go. Snug it up a little. Now, another thing too, some of these alternators come with a hex head shaft where you can use the wrench on here and you can use an Allen wrench inside here, and you can kind of squeeze the two of them together to get this really tight. This one doesn't, and you'll notice as I'm hitting this, you'll see the fan's blades move inside there because I'm not able to hold this tight enough. You could hit this with the impact, but do it really, really light. You don't want to kill this on here. So we're back outside here. I'm going to put this here, put a block of wood just underneath the fin to kind of hold it securely, and I'm going to hit it very, very light with the impact. Okay, that's probably all you need. Now we're ready to put this back in here. You've got your two mounting ears up and down like that, and you've got this clocked correctly with the plug facing down. Now you've got to get this in here. It kind of only goes in about one way. Turn it on its side and it'll slide right between the hoses and the air box. You can get it right in there. You'll have to hold this bracket, the upper alternator bracket. You'll have to pin that upwards like that. Get somebody to hold it or use a piece of string. And now we've got that down in there with the bracket on top, and you've got to wrestle it in the rest of the way. Putting in that bottom bolt with that spacer on it, spacer goes forwards on the inside part of the bracket, and this is a lot to wrestle with. So okay, and once you have it all in there, you're ready to start tightening up your bolts again. And you know, leave all the bolts loose, of course, and you know, get it all nice and snug in there and ready to be tensioned. Now, the other thing about the belt too, a bunch of people on the forums and stuff like that were saying that, oh yeah, you can just use the stock Samurai belt. Well, on this Samurai, which has nothing on it, I was not able to use that and have any kind of real adjustment range over here at all. So I start with the alternator right in the middle of the adjustment range, and I was able to easily get this belt to work. And this was a Napa 25-73-40. And like I said, I used a Napa XL 7340. The 7330, I believe, was the original one, possibly, that was in here. That was too small, and there's a 7350, which is the next size up. This is the one in between those two. That is the belt right there. So the belt is 10 millimeter by 880 millimeter. You know, or 34 5/8 is the correct length. So there you go. Okay, so there we are. It's all installed. The belt lines up absolutely perfect, and there's plenty of room in there. And if you notice, I routed my wires under the alternator, so the plug faces down on the engine side, and the wires just kind of easily loop up and around and go right into the factory location. I've got my new power wire running out of there. So that's how it's set up. See if I can get a shot in through the back here. See, and the clocking is correct. So you've got your plug going straight out there, and all this other stuff is all perfectly set here. You don't have to worry about a lot of water getting into the connector. You know, if it was clocked a slightly different way. I mean, you only have a real limited choice here, so this is what I picked, and this works fantastic in here. So overall, putting a CS130 in here is a real easy upgrade. You know, especially, you know, if you're going to start running, like, you know, LED bars and stuff like that, you know, all kinds of lights and accessories. And these CS130s put out 105 amps supposedly. That's what they're rated for. You can also get, if you do Google search for Iceberg CS130, there's some company that makes a better rear end that goes on here with cooling fins and everything, because they say these, you know, supposedly tend to overheat sometimes if they're the older ones or whatever. And you know, I don't think I'll have too much problem with that. And you know, this one right here, the part number I told you is the it's a Duralast Gold from Autozone here in the United States, so this is a 100% new alternator. And I think these are the same as the Remy Golds and the other AC Delco 100% new alternators, because they're all being made in Mexico and, you know, probably all in the same factory or something, and they're just slapping different names on them. So, you know, this one's fine and I'm good to go. And if you get the Duralast Gold, you also get, you know, lifetime warranty, so if something happens to that, you rip it out and, you know, send it back. So overall, this was a really easy swap out in here. Real simple, lots of room around the alternator. You know, decent alternator puts out 105 amps. So when you're running like, you know, light bars like this and stuff, you don't get a big, you know, power drop or whatever. These are rated for 105 amps. So, you know, that's like a serious upgrade in here in terms of power. Now when I kick on this light and I have the heater on, plus the lights at night, you know, the main lights and everything, it'll be perfect. I had somebody else's borrowed CS130 in here for, you know, about a week prior to me getting this one ordered. And when I kick on, when I have my low beams on, and then I kick on this 100-watt light bar, nothing happens. On my voltmeter inside, there isn't even a blip on that. And you know, of course, the heater still pulls a little bit, but it's pretty hilarious, you know, when I can kick on the extra light and I don't get any voltage drop at all, you know, coming out of this thing. So this thing's doing a real good job in here. So I'm going to put a list to all the different parts, you know, the pigtail and part numbers for these alternators and the belt and everything at the end of the video here, so you guys can go track these down and get them installed in the Samurai. Get it in there and power up.